Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to dive into the fascinating world of Google Earth Studio. Now, Google Earth Studio is a powerful animation tool that allows you to create stunning cinematic videos using the vast imagery and data from Google Earth. And it's perfect for content creators, filmmakers, and storytellers who want to add a new dimension to their projects. Now, you might be familiar with Google Earth, which is an amazing platform for exploring our planet, and I have done a few videos which extensively covers the capabilities of Google Earth Pro. But Google Earth Studio takes it a step further by giving you the ability to create dynamic animations that captivate your audience. Now, one of the standout features of Google Earth Studio is its extensive library of pre-built camera movements and visual effects. Whether you want to smoothly fly over a mountain range, zoom into a bustling city, or orbit around a famous landmark, Google Earth Studio provides a wide range of preset animations that make it easy to create stunning visuals. Not only that, you can do things like time-lapse animations with some amazing control over the camera movements through its keyframe animation system. And you can customize every aspect of the camera's path, speed, and orientation to create unique and compelling visual narratives. So as you can see, with Google Earth Studio, the possibilities are truly endless, and you can bring your creative visions to life, tell compelling stories, and transport your viewers into any corner of the world just in a matter of few minutes. And in this tutorial, I'm going to take you through the steps of creating an animation just like what you saw at the beginning of this video. And by the end of this tutorial, I assure that you will have a very solid understanding and the confidence you need to get started with your own animation project. And the best thing about this is that Google is offering these amazing capabilities for the public absolutely for free. So guys, without further ado, let's jump in and get started with the tutorial. If you want to navigate to the different sections of the video, feel free to use the timestamps. I have sectioned out the video for your convenience. So first thing first, how do you get access to Google Earth Studio? Well, the process is extremely easy. All you have to do is open up your Chrome browser and search for Google Earth Studio. And right over here, you can see the first response that we get is from Google. And if I click right over here, I would be able to go into this amazing landing page of Google Earth Studio. And something to keep in mind is that if you want to use Google Earth Studio, you will need to have a Google account. And when you create a Google account for yourself, you're going to receive a Gmail address, and this Gmail address is absolutely necessary for you to sign up for Google Earth Studio. So what you need to do is just click right over here, try Earth Studio, and you will be required to log in with your Google account. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert my Gmail address right over here and click next. Enter the password, click next. And if you're trying to access Google Earth Studio for the very first time, you definitely encounter this page. So this is going to be sort of a registration page. And as you can see, you would have to enter your first name, your last name, your email would be right over here, details about your company or any affiliations, and you will have to select your country as well as the industry that matches very closely to the type of work that you're doing. And right over here, you will have to add just a couple of sentences explaining how you're planning to use Google Earth Studio. And after that, you will have to click submit over here. And as it says right over here, the preview version of Google Earth Studio is currently granted on a case-by-case basis. Typically, it takes roughly about 1 day for them to actually grant you permission. However, I have heard cases where they actually take a bit longer than that. So that's something that you actually have to be patient about if you're signing up for the very first time. And once they grant you permission, you're going to actually receive an email like this saying, "Welcome to Google Earth Studio. Great news, you've been invited to preview Google Earth Studio." So when you get this email, that means you're just ready to get started with your first animation project. All you have to do is just click right over here, or you can just simply follow the steps that we did by searching for Google Earth Studio using the Google Chrome browser itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click right over here, and that's going to take me to the landing page of Google Earth Studio again. And finally, if you get to see this page, that means you're already in. You can get started with your very first animation project. So when it comes to getting started with the projects, you actually have two options. You can either open an existing project, which for us is not an option at this moment because we are just getting started with our very first Google Earth Studio project. So what we can do is we can either click on blank project, or we can click on this quick starts. And if you click right over here, they will provide you with 5 different project templates. As you can see over here, we have the zoom to template, orbit, point to point, spiral, and fly to, and orbit. However, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back one step and I'm going to open up a blank project, because in this tutorial I'm actually going to get started from the very beginning and I'm going to teach you how to create your own effects so that you would have much more manual control over the project that you're trying to create rather than relying on the limited number of existing project templates. So let's go ahead and click blank project. And right over here you can see that we come to this project setup page. Right over here you can enter a name for your project. And since my animation is going to be in the city of Edinburgh, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say Edinburgh animation. And right over here, if you expand this, you will see that you actually have the option of not only using Earth for your animations, you can even use Moon and Mars. However, I think for this tutorial, we are going to stick with Earth. And when it comes to dimensions, right over here, you can manually specify your dimensions. And I'm just going to leave this in the default value, which is perfectly fine for the animation that I'm trying to create. And right over here, the frame rate, I'm also going to stick with 30 frames per second. Right over here, you can decide the duration of your animation. Now you can either decide it by the number of frames, but I think the easiest way to sort of judge the length of your video would be by the number of minutes or by the number of seconds. So for that, you will have to select time code over here. And right in the middle, what you see is basically the number of seconds. So if I want to create maybe an animation of 1 minute, all I have to do is just put 60 seconds over here. And over here, you can see that it recognized that the duration that I need is 1 minute. And after that, click start. And this is how your editing interface is basically going to look like when you fire up Google Earth Studio for the very first time with your project settings. So guys, let's get started by exploring the interface just a little bit. Right over here, you can see the main menu. We have File, Edit, View, Overlays, Animation, and a Help menu. And right below that, we have a search button over here. If you click right over here, you would be able to search for a specific location of your interest. And right over here, you have some playback control buttons. So since we are dealing with an animation, you can think of this as a very short video edit that you're going to perform. So every time when you make a change or every time when you add a new feature, you would like to sort of play back your video and see how it looks. So you can actually accomplish tasks like that using this set of buttons. We have the play button and we have a button for previous and next frame, and we can go to the start or the end of the workspace by using these two shortcuts. And every time when you play the video, if you set this button to be loop playback, what happens is that your video will start over again from the very beginning and it'll keep on playing as a loop. But if you'd like your video to just go from start to the end and stop right there, you can just click right over here and select single playback, so that it won't actually loop back again right from the beginning. And if you would like to toggle to full screen, you can do that using this button. And right over here is actually where all the action is going to happen. You can see that we have an amazing visualization of a 3D globe. And basically you can use your mouse buttons along with the scroll wheel to navigate. For example, if you would like to zoom in to a certain location like this, you can use the scroll wheel of your mouse. And you could use the scroll wheel to zoom out as well. And you also can use the left and right mouse buttons. For example, if you want to move around by gripping a certain location, you can just press and hold the left mouse button. And when you move your mouse, you can actually move the earth just like this. And if you happen to zoom into a certain location, you can see that the capability in terms of zooming in is actually quite remarkable. And right now you can see that we are sort of looking at the earth from sort of a top view. However, if you would like to tilt your view, what you can do is you can press and hold your scroll wheel and you can move your mouse slightly up, and that's going to tilt your view like this. As you can see, we start experiencing the real 3D capabilities of Google Earth Studio when we tilt our view like this. And if you would like to rotate your view, the easiest way to do that would be to, again, press and hold your scroll wheel. And when I do that, you can see that the icon also changes. And while you're holding your scroll wheel, if you just slightly move your mouse to left and right directions, you can see that you can actually move the view to left and right while it's tilted in this kind of a manner. And if you would like to zoom out from a specific area, all you have to do is again use your scroll wheel, just scroll down and it'll zoom out like this. And if you would like to sort of adjust the view again to a sort of a top view, all you have to do is again press and hold the scroll wheel and move your mouse slightly downwards, and that's going to tilt again the view like this, and you can just zoom out to a variety of different altitude levels depending on what you're trying to do. And coming down to the lower part of our editing screen or the interface, you can see right over here we have the timeline, which is one of the most important parts of this entire interface, because every little change that we're trying to do will be sort of graphically displayed along this timeline, and we would be actually able to manually fully control how our animation is going to appear using the controls that we are going to get on this timeline. And if you can recall, we set the duration of the animation to be 60 seconds, so that's why you see that the entire duration is starting from 0 all the way up to 60 seconds, which is 1 minute. And if you happen to use a different duration at the beginning of the project when you set things up, then the duration that you specified over there will be displayed right over here, and the timeline will be adjusted accordingly. And if you look at the lower left side of the screen, you can see that we have a section called add attributes, and following that we have, when you get started with the project, we have two options. First one is camera position and camera rotation. And in addition to those two, we actually have a number of different attributes as well. If you happen to click right over here, you would be able to see that we have access to a number of attributes that we actually can use in our animation. For example, we can set the camera target, we can adjust the camera's field of view, we can even adjust the time of day. As we progress through the animation, if you can recall the animation that you saw at the beginning of this video, at some point you actually saw that the time of day actually changes as the animation is moving forward. So we can set those kind of changes using this time of day attribute as well. And we have a couple of other options as well: clouds, ocean overlay, 3D buildings, and an option to adjust the camera's roll. And in today's tutorial, we're also going to cover a number of different additional attributes in order to take our animation to the next level, in addition to the two attributes that we already have over here. And right next to this attributes button, you will see a button which is actually going to define where each and every effect and attribute that we are going to apply to our animation is supposed to be along this timeline, which is by adding keyframes. And these are the buttons to add keyframes, and we are going to extensively discuss how to use these keyframe buttons as well as we go forward. And finally, right over here, once you're done with your animation, you can click on this render button in order to convert your animation into a final product, and you would be able to download your animation as an MP4 video. So guys, that's a bit of an introduction to the interface that we're going to deal with during the next 10 to 20 minutes. So what I'm going to do is, as the very first thing, is to actually zoom into my location of interest. And for this tutorial, I'm actually going to use an amazing historical castle located right in the heart of the city of Edinburgh in Scotland, and that's called the Edinburgh Castle. So I'm just going to click right over here and search for Edinburgh Castle. And as you can see, I get the option to select Edinburgh Castle as I'm typing in. And this doesn't really have to be a name of a specific landmark. You can even actually type the name of a location or maybe a city that you're interested in, quite similar to how you would actually use Google Maps and basically Google Earth Pro if you want to navigate into a certain location. So let's click right over here, and that should take us right into Edinburgh. And this is the Edinburgh Castle. Now, when you're looking at Edinburgh Castle from this sort of a view, I think it's not going to be that interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the scroll wheel again and tilt my view like this. And when I do that, you can see that we can start seeing the Edinburgh Castle right over here, along with these amazing surrounding buildings right in the middle of Edinburgh. And you can even move your view like this in order to get a better position. So if I tilt this down just a little bit, you can see Arthur's seat right over here. And let me move the view just a little bit like this. So for my animation, I think what I would do is I would actually get started from somewhere over here, and I would move my camera towards Edinburgh Castle. So in order to do that, all I have to do is just maybe zoom out a bit and head over to somewhere close to the top of that mountain, which is right over here. And now I would like to look at the castle, so I'm just going to tilt my view in this kind of a manner. So if I place my camera like this, you can see that the castle is supposed to be right over here. And something to keep in mind is that if you would like to set your starting scene to a certain location, then it's always actually wise to bring this slider right to the beginning, because once you set your camera view, you're actually going to use these keyframe buttons in order to sort of lock the attributes, which in this case happens to be the camera position and the camera rotation. So if I actually expand this, you will see that as soon as I do the changes like this, the camera position and the camera rotation actually changes. So if I would like to sort of enter to the Edinburgh Castle from a point like this, once I'm happy with my starting scene, all I have to do is just make sure that I set the camera position by clicking right over here and set the camera rotation, under which we get pan and tilt to be these two numbers, and we can basically lock this by adding a keyframe. Now you don't really have to do this one by one each time you change the placement of your camera. What you can do quite easily is actually click right over here, and that's going to take care of adding all these keyframes all together just in one go, rather than you having to go one by one. So from now onwards, unless there's a specific reason to do so, I'll actually be using this keyframe all attributes button rather than using these individual buttons in order to lock the position and the attributes that I'm actually going to use as we go forward. So this is going to be my starting scene, and by the time we reach 20 seconds mark, I would like for my camera to have already reached Edinburgh Castle. Now what I have in mind is that rather than just moving the camera directly from the mountain range all the way to the castle, I think it would be quite nice to sort of go around the castle and end up with a view like this, where we sort of start looking back at the mountain range, and maybe we can set the scene that we would like to have at this 20-second mark to be something like this, or even something like this should be fine, I guess. And once you're happy with the camera position, which includes the longitude, latitude and the altitude and the camera rotation items, all you have to do is again just click right over here, keyframe all attributes, and now you can see that it actually links the records that you have at 0 second to all the records that you have at right around this 20-second mark. And now the cool thing is that all these attributes that we specified are actually going to change linearly as we go from 0 seconds until 20 seconds. So what do I mean by that? If I turn this slider back to 0 seconds, so if I play this back, you can see that we are kind of getting started with that high altitude position, the high altitude camera position that we got started from. And by the time we reach 20 seconds, we should end up with that particular camera view that we actually set right behind the castle, looking towards the mountain. And just like that, you can see that it's actually going to lock the position in this final position that we decided that we would like to actually have our camera at. However, you might get the sense that it's actually not exciting just yet, because it's actually a very plain movement of the camera from our starting position all the way until we get to this position. And right now I'm actually going to tell you how we can make these scenes much more exciting. Now to do that, we actually would have to use multiple views. Now you can see that right over here we have a view called camera view, and it's quite obvious what the camera view is. We can look at these 3D buildings in any which way that we want. We can actually tilt the view and look at the entire scene from the top, or we can do kind of a street view like this if you want to do so. But at the same time, we actually have the option of changing to a number of other views as well. Now if I change this to this top view, you can see that we basically lose all the 3D features, but we end up with this kind of a plain Google map. And what you're seeing right over here is basically the camera position. Now we got started from this point, and our camera essentially moved from this point all the way until this point, and this point is actually the place where the Edinburgh Castle happens to be located at. But as you can see, using either of these views alone might not really bring the full potential of actually us being able to exploit the capabilities of this Google Earth Studio program. And luckily, they have actually provided us with an option to change the viewport layout. So rather than having just one view, what we can do is we can actually have multiple views, just like this. And right now you can see that on the left side we have the camera view, and on the right side we have the top view. Well, just for convenience, I'm actually going to switch this and have the top view on the left side and have the camera view on the right side. And what's quite interesting is that when I move the camera using my left viewport, you can see that it instantly communicates everything that I'm doing with the viewport on the right side as well. And it immediately gives me how the camera view would look like depending on the changes that I would do using this top view. And that's going to be extremely handy when it comes to us navigating to certain locations, and especially when we want to actually use the path of the camera in a bit of a creative way rather than having this kind of a linear movement from the starting point all the way until the ending point. Alright guys, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to head back to the starting point, and when I play this video, you can see how the camera actually moves. We have the starting point, and as we saw before, it's taking me right to the back side of the castle. And when it comes to where the camera is facing, you can basically see that the camera is facing towards, well, based on this map, you can see that it's kind of facing towards the northeast direction. And if I move back this slider, you can see that the direction where the camera is pointed at, it changes as we go from the starting point to this 20-second mark. But what I would like to do is I would actually like to have the camera always pointed towards the castle and not really have a random movement in the direction of the camera. And you can actually do that simply by right-clicking over here. And if you set the camera target to be the castle, now what happens is that you can see that in addition to the camera position and the camera rotation that we had, we also actually get a new attribute called camera target. And now look what happens when I move this slider back, and if I were to play this, now you can see that as opposed to what happened before, now the camera is always facing towards the Edinburgh Castle, which happens to be my camera target. And this is going to be super interesting because now every movement that we do, regardless of the movement that we actually do, our camera will be pointed towards the castle. And that's exactly what I want. And I told you guys that right now we have this sort of a linear movement of the cameras from the starting point all the way until the ending point. Well, currently we have the ending point at 20 seconds, even though we will actually go all the way until 60 seconds. But starting from 0 all the way until 20, you can see that we're actually moving in sort of a linear direction. But what I would like to do instead is to sort of bend the path of this movement. Rather than having our camera move linearly like this, I would actually like the camera to sort of take a bit of a curved path and have the camera pass the front side of the castle while pointing the camera towards the castle and make sort of a circular movement around the castle and end up with this shot finally. So there are actually multiple ways of doing that, but the easiest way to do that would be basically to add a control point somewhere along this line. And as you can see, when I move my slider, the camera also actually slides along this line. So I'm just going to bring this slider somewhere right in the middle, maybe somewhere around the 10-second mark. And after that, I'm going to add a set of keyframes simply by clicking on this button. And as soon as I do that, you can see that if I just move this slightly, a new sort of handle or a new button actually appeared right over here. Now this button is actually the button that's going to give me full control with regard to the movement of the camera from my starting position all the way until the ending position. And what I can do is I can basically click right over here and make my path a bit of a curved path like this. And now you can see that if I take my slider to the starting position and if I play this animation, you can see now the camera is actually moving along this path and it's no longer moving in a linear path. Instead, it's actually taking this kind of a curved path. And as you can see, now it's going around the castle and slowly it'll kind of reduce its altitude, and finally by the 20-second mark, it'll end up giving us this final shot that we had before. Alright, I think you guys got the basic idea about tampering with this path, and rather than just having our camera move through a linear direction, we can actually make our camera go around like this when we have a handle just like this. And you actually have much more control when it comes to deciding the curvature or the path of your camera. You can see that when I select this button, these two handles from these two sides also actually get appeared. And if I were to kind of drag, well, let me adjust the view just a little bit. And if I just happen to drag these handles, you can see that the radius of the curvature actually changes accordingly. So it's basically up to you to decide how further away you would like to actually have your camera move around before it comes back to the back of the castle. And I think I would like to maybe do a movement like this. And the cool thing is that you don't really have to limit yourself just to one handle or one set of keyframes at this 10-second mark. For example, if you would like to have a bit more control over the radius of this curvature, what you can do is you can basically, well, somewhere around here, maybe add another set of keyframes, which is going to give you another button like this, and you can control the curvature or control the radius of the curvature in this kind of a manner. And as you can see, the ways how you can sort of exercise your creativity is practically endless. You can basically try all sorts of different camera movements like this until you get the perfect shot that satisfies your artistic mind. Alright, now if I play this back, you can see how the camera basically moves. And before I move into the next part, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to show you, in case if you happen to mess something up, and when you're doing this for the very first time, the chances are you might actually need to sort of make adjustments here and there. And if you come across a situation like that where you need to remove certain records that you actually did for certain attributes, you can get rid of those records simply by highlighting them like this. And you can see that as soon as I did that, it turned into sort of a blue color. That means it actually got highlighted. And right over here, you can see these two handles also actually got highlighted, which corresponds to these two set of keyframes. And all you have to do is just hit the delete button and it'll be gone. And right now you can see that we are back to this linear movement that we had initially. So that's basically the way to get rid of certain keyframes in case if you happen to make a mistake. Alright, so what we can do is let's quickly put this back to what we had. Now I'm also actually going to add another set of keyframes right around here, because in this initial movement, the time it takes for my altitude to drop all the way from 3550 until, well, around 140, I think it takes actually a bit too much time. So what I'm going to do is drop the altitude by a significant level right around here, simply by adjusting my view like this. And as you can see, I'm dropping my altitude significantly. And let's get past this mountain right over here, just so that we won't really be obstructed by the mountain as we zoom into it, just like this. And after that, all I have to do is just hit keyframe all attributes, and it'll be recorded into a number of different keyframes like this. And just like what we had before, I'm just going to add probably another keyframe around here, which gives me another handle to play with. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to adjust this curvature just like this in a way that it gives me this sort of a smooth curve which goes right around the castle. And we are going to have to make use of these handles as well as we are doing this adjustment to ensure that we retain the smoothness that we need. Alright, let's give this a go and see how it looks by playing it. Here, as you can see now, it looks absolutely amazing. However, I feel like the camera is actually still moving a bit further away from the castle. So I would like to reduce the radius in this kind of a manner, just because I don't really want the camera to sort of move that far away from the castle, because we are missing the main attraction if we happen to sort of swing our camera much further away from the castle. So let's see how this looks now. Yeah, I think what I would do is I would probably zoom in just a little bit more, and I will try to see whether I can adjust the path to be a bit more close to the castle than what I had before. And I added another set of keyframes right around here as well. And if you feel like your scene is actually moving a bit too fast at the beginning and it's slowing down a bit more than what you expect, what you can do is you can actually again move the keyframes a bit towards the left side of this timeline. So for example, if I want to speed this part up, what I can do is I can actually move this again towards here and similarly select all the keyframes right around here as well and move that to around this 15-second mark. So now you can see that it zooms nicely into the castle and the camera basically moves around the castle and it's getting pointed towards the back of the castle as we complete the full curvature right over here. And now if you were to move beyond this position, what I would like to do is I would like to actually fix the camera in this position for maybe for a second or two. So if you would like to actually set all the attributes pertaining to this shot without any changes and have it actually as a still image for a couple of seconds, all you have to do is just move the slider a couple of seconds and you can actually add all the keyframe records just like this, so that when the playback happens, as it moves from this mark to this mark, everything will be sort of displayed as a still image. And as the next step of this process, I would like to change my camera angle to be something like this. Changes to a position like this. And again, similar to what we discussed before, now if you're happy with this sort of a shot as your next shot, all you have to do is make sure that your slider is placed at the correct location and add a set of keyframes for that as well, so that the movement or the position of the camera from this point to this point will be sort of transitioned in a smooth manner. And now we'll see how that movement basically looks. So as you can see, yeah, it's adding that spiral. And if I want to have that spiral effect just a bit more, what I can do is I can actually, instead of using this set of keyframes, I'm just going to go to edit and press undo so that I will get rid of that set of keyframes. And I'm just going to get the view to be something like this. Press keyframe all attributes again. And now play this back and see how it looks. And you know, if you would like to speed up this movement, all you have to do is again select all these keyframes and shorten the duration so that the movement will actually happen much faster, as you can see right over here. And starting from this position, well, again, you can see that since we set the camera target, the camera is always directed towards the castle no matter where we go. Even if we change the altitude, still the camera is sort of facing downwards. And now as our next movement, if I wanted to maybe take the camera to a position like this, I can quite simply do that by making sure that the slider is somewhere over here and by adding a set of keyframes again. So let's check how that movement looks. And now you can see that it tilts down perfectly. I'm just going to leave this set of attributes maybe for another second or two by simply just moving the slider a couple of seconds forward, just like this. And as my next movement, I would maybe like to have my camera capture a shot like this at the set of keyframes. And I think I made a mistake with regard to the time duration, so I'm just going to select this and bring this forward just a little bit, and let's see how that movement looks now. And as you can see, from this point to this point, it's actually a linear movement currently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually add another set of keyframes over here. And I'm trying to see how I can create some sort of a curvature in this within this movement as well. So let's just see how this looks. Yeah, now you can see that the camera is basically going around the castle. And let's keep this view for a couple more seconds. And finally, what I would like to do is I would like to actually take a shot that's basically zooming out from the castle, maybe back towards the Arthur's seat right over here. Maybe something like this. And right over here on the top view, you might not really see the camera until you zoom out just a bit. Yeah, that's a mistake that I did. You have to make sure that you decide where you need to place the slider and then do the changes. Otherwise, if you click on the slider, everything just goes back to where it was supposed to be. Alright, if you decide that this is actually a good place to set your camera right around here, add another set of keyframes, just like how we always do, and give it a bit of a play and see whether you actually like the movement of the camera or not. And from this 55-second mark to the 60-second mark, I would basically leave this to be a still shot. I wouldn't really have anything going on in the scene just yet. So what I would do is I would actually take the slider all the way to the back and press add a set of keyframes again. And that almost brings us to the end of this tutorial. However, I think there's one more thing that I would like to highlight. Now, when it comes to these additional attributes, I think you guys can remember that we added this camera position as an additional attribute. And in addition to that, I will also actually like to show you guys how this time of day attribute works. For example, yeah, this one right over here. So right now what I'm thinking is that until right around this shot, I wouldn't really make any changes to the time of day element. However, as the camera moves from this shot all the way until this shot, I will try to change the time of day element just so that we would be able to see how the sky looks if, for example, if you think that as it moves from this 45-second to this 55-second mark, if you're moving towards the midnight time within this 10-second period, and you can actually play around with this time of day element, which really adds a nice vibrance to your overall animation that you're doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place my slider right around here, and I'm also going to activate this time of day attribute. However, at the current setting, I'm just going to make sure that I still use a time that's right around noon, or probably sometime afternoon. So let's just specify this to be about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Here you can specify the dates. Now the first digit is month, followed by day, and followed by that the year. Now, depending on the time, depending on the month and the date that you're using, time of day element can drastically change, because if you're talking about the winter time, which means, for example, the 1st of January in 2023, the look outside at around 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock might be completely different to how it should look during the summertime. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to maybe retain this to be still July, and just going to set this to be 1st of July instead of 7th of July, right around here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a keyframe in order to record these properties to a keyframe button right over here. And as I move towards this mountainous area, I would like to change the time of day to be around, let's see how 8 o'clock in the evening looks on the same day. Yeah, you can see that immediately as soon as I type 8 o'clock, the light changed completely. And if you would like to see how 9 o'clock looks, yeah, I think that actually adds a bit more vibrance. So let's make this to be about 10 o'clock. Yeah, I think that might be a bit too dark. Yeah. All right. Now what we can do is we can actually see how that changes. So even though we're actually changing quite a number of hours from 2 o'clock to 9:30, we're doing that within a gap of about 10 seconds. So you will see that that change is going to happen immediately, which is going to actually add that vibrance element to our animation. So let's see how that looks. So you'll see that it'll retain these properties all the way until it finds the first keyframe, and from here to here it'll kind of interpolate the time, and as we move towards the mountainous area you will see that it'll start getting dark. And what we can do is, even though we are not actually moving our frame from this moment to this moment, we can still move the time or the time of day. So what I can do is I can set the time right around here to be about 9:30, or maybe let's say 9:45. And now you can see how the light outside changes. Quite amazing, isn't it? And that pretty much concludes most of the things that I actually wanted to discuss today with you guys. Now all I have to do is just click right over here on this render button. And as you can see, we have to enter the name. I'm just going to retain the name that I entered at the beginning of this video. And it's actually going to render in cloud, and later on it'll actually notify us that we have a pending download. And we can download this as a sequence or a number of JPEG images based on the frame rate that you specified. Or you can actually download it as an MP4 file, which I think is the most convenient way to do this. Well, this option I think came quite recently. Just a couple of months ago we only had this option, but it's quite nice to actually have this option where we could directly download it as a compiled video rather than downloading a sequence of images. And we are covering all the frames from 0 to 1800. That's the total number of frames that we have, and we're returning the dimensions to be 1920 by 1080, which is the full HD resolution. And right over here you can see that we will have to provide some attribution. Now that attribution actually refers to this right over here. So at this moment you cannot really produce this video without giving attribution to Google Earth. You really need to have that on your video. The only flexibility that you get is actually you can decide the position where you'd like to actually keep this attribution. So by default it comes somewhere around bottom right, but if you would like to actually have it maybe at the top left corner, you can do that. Or you can actually add a custom position by moving this around. I'm just going to actually have that at right around the bottom right corner, or maybe somewhere over here. And I'm not going to dive into these advanced functionalities because we're not actually going to use this video in something like Adobe After Effects. So it's not going to be quite relevant to actually discuss this advanced part. So once you have set this attribution position, all you have to do is just click right over here, submit, and over here you can see that it says submitting Edinburgh animation to cloud renderer. Now this is actually going to take some time. So I'll see you guys again when I get the notification from Google Earth Studio saying that my video is now ready and I can go ahead and download it. And guys, I've just gotten the notification saying that my video is ready to be downloaded. So what I can do is I can go to animation and go to cloud renders, and that'll open up the cloud renders window. And right over here you can see that I actually can download this immediately. So let's go ahead and do that. And once it's downloaded, you can see the file right over here. I'm just going to right click and open it using VLC Media Player. And you can immediately start seeing, or you can immediately notice how vibrant and how realistic it looks compared to what we saw before in our editing window. Because in our editing window, what we saw was actually the preview before it got rendered. But after it gets rendered, you can see that it actually remarkably improves the quality. So guys, with that, we have reached the end of this tutorial. If you did like what we discussed today, show your support by hitting that like button. And if you would like to actually stay tuned for this kind of interesting tutorials, you can always consider subscribing to this channel as well. We have close to 150 videos covering quite a number of different topics in the field of remote sensing and GIS, with some extensive tutorials teaching you how to handle software packages like ArcGIS and QGIS. So if you are interested in checking them out, you can definitely head over to our playlists and see whether you can find something that you like. And with that, it's going to be a wrap, guys. Thanks a lot for joining with us. If you do have any questions regarding the tutorial, don't forget to add a comment down below, and I'll see you guys again with another exciting tutorial soon.